Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. Today, I will be sharing true paranormal stories from the web. As always, you can find all episodes of the show on the podcast page, along with links to social media and other ways to contact me. And that page is salcidoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. Always happy to hear from you all, whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions or stories of paranormal experiences, whether they're your own or from others that you trust. Happy to either read those or have you join me on the show to talk about them. And if you want to support the show, there are a few different ways to do that. Of course, sharing the show with anyone that you think may be interested. There's also, you can check out my books on Amazon, paranormal fiction and nonfiction. And I also have a couple of different ways that you can donate directly if you are able and you would like to do so. All support is appreciated but never expected. So, I have several stories here, some from the other day that I didn't get to finish, and then some that I found tonight. I was actually putting them all together tonight, right up until about 20 minutes before start time. So, thank you all for being here and listening, whether you're here listening now or on the stream, or if you listen to the podcast or our YouTube feeds. And again, a reminder, coming up soon, you will be able to listen to the show, different episodes of the show, over on Trouble Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting. So that is being put together as we speak, and really excited about that and grateful to be part of that community of amazing people, including the host, of course, Michael Strange. Hello, I see you there listening, and everyone else that's involved as well. So with that, I think I can get to the stories here, and we'll go from there. So these first few are stories that I found for the last show. And this one says, my uncle worked as a trustee in the county jailhouse. It was there that he experienced something he couldn't explain. Neither could any of the other people who watched the whole thing live via security cameras. It was early morning, and my uncle was cleaning the sheriff's department patrol room. This involved mopping and sweeping, cleaning the areas around the computers, and taking out the garbage. He had just tied up a garbage bag when a swivel chair from a nearby desk rolled right into him. Thinking someone was playing a prank on him, he turned around, but there was no one else in the room. Shocked and frightened, he quickly left the patrol room, leaving the bag of garbage behind. And of course, the jailers watching the security cameras saw the whole thing. He never went back in there again on his own, either. To this day, he still can't explain what happened. Of course, no one wanted to talk about the event, except my uncle. So that's really amazing in a way. If it's one thing when you have an experience. I mean, not that I ever discount people's experiences when they're on their own. I mean, I've had so many myself. But when you have video evidence, live video evidence, as it's happening, and people see it as it's happening through the video camera, that that's really quite the story there. I feel like I skipped part of it, but I don't think I did. But basically, just the idea that something like that could happen, and of course that doesn't get talked about a lot. When people have experiences like that, especially in, I'm guessing, government and military and police locations, that does not get brought up all the time because of the whole stigma against the paranormal. And just, I can understand in a way because you can't explain it. But that's quite the sighting that have happened there. And I don't blame him for thinking it was a prank, but obviously it wasn't. At least not that I can figure out based on the story. So yeah, um, but you hear that so much in official places. Things happen. Weird things do happen that people can't explain, even in those kinds of places. Especially, I would guess, in some of those kinds of places where it's a jail or that's a lot of energy going on there. So, moving on to the next story. Let's see here. This one says, when I was 12 years old, I stayed overnight with a few others at a friend's house. There was a bluff near their house, and we would visit it often, especially at night, to stargaze and to look out at the ocean. Construction on a new house had recently started, blocking access to this bluff. So we decided to go and visit it one last time, even if only to get as close to it as we could. We didn't get very far, as construction was well underway, with tools and supplies all over the place. So we stayed fairly close to the entrance to the bluff. As the three of us stood there, looking up and out into the night sky, we saw a figure off in the distance. It was pure white, but it didn't give off any light. And there were no discernible features, either. It was only a solid white mass, about as tall as a person, but more rectangular than anything. We all took out our phones, activated the flashlight feature, and tried to get a better look at the figure. But that didn't help. It started to come towards us, despite not having any legs to speak of, which scared us off immediately. There's Logan. We ran back to our friend's house, still unable to believe what we had seen. We went back the next day to see if there was anything we could have mistaken for some kind of apparition, but there was nothing. Does anyone know what we saw? And that's where the story ends. So, it seems almost like I wonder if it was rectangular. Was it some kind of just a really intense light, but that didn't give off any extra, that didn't shine anywhere else? It sounds almost like a moving doorway, in a way, but I don't know what they saw. I wonder if it was there to sort of warn them off because they were kids on a construction site. Maybe it was somehow trying to protect them, even though it did frighten them. Hard to say, but you hear about that. You hear people see things that they look like they're the size of a person, but then they don't have features, and it's hard to explain what it is. So, I don't know how to write that off. But that sort of reminds me of something that I saw as a kid, here and there, a couple of times. And I think I've told those stories before. Let's see, one moment for 1 second here. Okay, so and this was of course that white light figure that my cousin and I saw at his house when we were kids. It was the size of a person, but didn't have any discernible arms or legs or features. It was just this white light. And of course, this one that we saw had some kind of a giant claw, like a cat's claw in the middle of it. But just the similarities between that rectangular shape almost and the color and everything. That's a neat little connection there. I wonder what causes that. So, but hopefully, maybe I wonder now too with that if the people that moved into that property, if they ever saw anything. Of course, you can never know, but that's always a question that comes to mind when it's just one sighting of something, and then the people that saw it don't really go back to the area again. But then other people show up. So, anyway, Neat story there. Moving on to the next one. This is the last of the stories that were left over from the last one of these shows. Let's see here. Gotta find... Okay, here we go. This one says, I'm posting this to see if anyone can relate to this experience. It happened last February one night while I was walking home. It was already 11 p.m. and I had a ways to go, in an area that does not have any street lights. The light of the full moon was all I had. I was hurrying as fast as I could, on edge about being alone and out so late. I was walking past a path that led into a small bit of woods when I saw a figure behind the tree. Excuse me. I only caught its hands, head, and one shoulder. But it was all red. Not red clothes, but red skin. Its fingers were long and pointy, and the face was narrow, but easy to make out, including bright white eyes and no hair. We looked at each other for about 10 seconds, as I was frozen in fear. It then moved behind a tree, and I never saw it again as I left the area and continued my walk home. I tried to convince myself that I had been seeing things, just to calm myself down, but I still remember the event to this day, down to the last detail. I can't explain it and was just wondering if anyone else has seen anything similar. So that's where that story ends, and I don't know. That seems odd. I mean, of course, the automatic thing I'm sure some people's minds will go to is if it's red, then it must have been evil, but not necessarily. It didn't do anything except for sort of try to hide. So that is odd as well. But it does sound like some kind of a creature, humanoid creature-like thing. I don't know, but I'm glad that it didn't actually come towards the person or at the person. So hard to say what it was, but I wonder if it was in the woods, it could be there, and if we can hide behind trees. It's hard to say what it was. So, but yeah, I'm not sure. It seems like maybe some kind of a nature being, maybe. But it's hard to say. Maybe even some kind of an alien. I mean, I guess if you want to go there, I think labels are always difficult, but yeah, hard to say what they saw there. Moving on to the next story. These are starting the ones that I found today. This next one says, for the first 12 years of my life, my family and I lived in a less than ideal apartment in a bad part of town, to the point where we would hear all kinds of things going on outside of the apartment at any given time. The apartment contained a hallway that branched off in different directions to get to the bedrooms, kitchen, and bathroom. The three of us girls stayed in one bedroom, while our brother stayed in another. I was around 10 years old when this happened. It was either fall or winter. Based on my memories of a heavy blanket that covered my sisters and I as we lay in bed. They had both fallen asleep before me. What happened next took place between one blink of my eyes and the next. I saw a figure in front of me that I'm guessing was a woman, as I could see that it had long, wavy hair. She appeared and vanished in between two blinks of my eyes. A year or so later, my older sisters and I were running around the apartment building, having fun, when one of them saw a figure of blue light in the hallway I was running through. When we got back to our apartment, I realized how frightened she was. She then said that she had seen the bottom of a blue dress and a foot walking down a hallway outside the living room. She even heard the floorboards creak beneath her. Even with all of these experiences, I never felt that they were negative in nature, other than that they frightened us a bit. And we never saw anything like that again while we were there either. Maybe she was just trying to figure out what we were doing there. So the story ends there, and sounds like multiple sightings, possibly of the same figure. I would wonder. There's not a ton of details there, but it could be the same one. I think sometimes when people have those multiple sightings of a similar or the same figure, it could just be someone else, no matter what state they're in, whether they're a spirit or it's some kind of a time anomaly where they think that the people that are writing the story are actually the ghosts. However, I think there's different ways that things can happen. I think sometimes these images that people see or these apparitions, whatever they are also just trying to figure out who else is there and why they're there, and don't necessarily mean to frighten anybody. They're just trying to figure out what's going on. And so that could have been what happened there. Especially with nothing else happening after that. That's possible. And it makes sense, but also you never know. But that seems to be almost logical in a way to me, trying to figure out what all these kids are doing there. But neat sightings, sounds like by multiple people, so that's always good when you have confirmation like that. Moving on to the next story. This one says, let me make sure I got the right one here. Okay, there we go. This is involving a fairly famous location, which is of course the Queen Mary, the ocean liner that was that served in the military for a while and everything, and is basically doesn't go anywhere anymore now. It's officially or permanently docked over in California. I forget now exactly where. But this one says, in the latter part of the 1980s, my husband, boyfriend at the time, and I attended an event on the Queen Mary. While there, we were able to do some exploring and came across an open door that led into a T-shaped room that appeared to be some kind of museum. I turned left to look at some exhibits and noticed a man and a woman standing nearby. The woman wore a green dress, while the man was wearing some kind of a formal uniform. I am no expert on fashion, but their clothes seemed to be from the 1930s or 40s. They looked at me, and I felt like I had interrupted a conversation. I excused myself and walked back the way I had come, and told my husband about the couple. He passed me and went around the corner. Then he asked what I was talking about. I joined him around the corner and saw that no one else was there. There is no way they could have gotten past us without being seen, and there was only one way in and out of the room. In the early 2000s, I was talking with a friend who had visited the Queen Mary in the 70s. She had been a little girl at the time, staying there with her family. She had noticed a woman in a green dress in their room. As soon as the woman realized she had been seen, she gave my friend an annoyed look and then vanished. There wasn't a man with her, but the description of the woman seemed to match, as far as I could tell. And that's where that story ends, and that is amazing, because so often, a lot of these famous places, they have legends and stories attached to them where there's stories about why these apparitions are seen, and in so many cases there's either no evidence or little evidence in terms of historical or documentation to verify these stories, but you still have activity, and it sounds like on the Queen Mary you still had activity. I haven't looked into all the details of that as far as what's verified and what's not and all of that, but these are two sightings that happen at different times to different people that could possibly match up. So I'm always amazed at those kinds of stories. I think even these places where maybe things didn't happen the way that everyone thinks they did, and yet there's still activity. So, neat story there. Let me check on the next one and see if it's short enough. I will do it. And we'll go from there. No, looks pretty long. So I think I'll just fill out the rest of this by, going over, like I said. Recently I did a stream. It was going to be a show, but the recording didn't work. But just for another example of this, what I'm talking about here regarding the Queen Mary, another place that has a similar situation, I think, is, of course, the Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana, where there is this story in this about this one slave that was there, and of course it was a plantation, and who was killed on the site, or who at least passed on the site, and there's no evidence, apparently, from what I've heard, to back that story up. Now, I always like to consider that maybe there's no evidence, but that doesn't mean that something didn't happen. But also, I think in some cases, even if there is no evidence, people still seem to see and have experiences with the central figures of the stories that they hear about in these places. And that, of course, when that happens, you have to wonder, is that because the story has been passed down for decades and everyone knows it in the area, and then everyone that visits the area knows it, and all this energy goes into this story and these figures, and somehow all the energy from all these people is combined and concentrated in one location, and then people are seeing this figure, this person, even though maybe they were never an actual living person. They're somehow now a conscious entity that was formed from all of these retellings of this story and people hearing about them. And I think that's just as amazing to me as any kind of verifiable apparition of a person that had passed being seen in a location, because that just implies there's so much more to our minds and the power that they have than we often think about. Could be. Matt Solid in chat says, I wonder if Queen Mary has residual energy trauma from the battles. Possibly, yeah. So I consider that Queen Mary to be another one of those locations where who knows what's going on there. But that's all we have time for today. Thank you all for being here and listening. I'll be back tomorrow to cover paranormal news on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care, everyone.